Good morning. My name is Eric Weltman. I'm a senior organizer with Food and Water Watch, a national consumer organization that supports a ban on fracking in New York. Thank you for joining us for the launching of a new coalition, New Yorkers Against Fracking. We are motivated to form this coalition by several concerns: that the Cuomo administration and the oil and gas industry are enormously exaggerating the benefits of fracking, that the claims of job creation, energy independence, and being clean are myths, that the Cuomo administration has failed to consider many of the negative impacts of fracking on our economy, our public health, and our environment. But most fundamentally, that fracking is inherently dangerous. That fracking is inherently dangerous and beyond our capacity to safely regulate. In the final analysis, there are safer alternatives to natural gas, but there are no alternatives to water. In the final analysis, there are safer alternatives to natural gas, but there are no alternatives to water. And so we are launching a coalition to help unify the strands of a growing and powerful movement. A movement that stretches from Long Island to Buffalo. A movement of farmers and of chefs, of student groups and of businesses, of doctors and of nurses, of national organizations and grassroots groups. A movement that stands 50 organizations strong and growing stronger by the moment. A movement that stands in defense of New York's water, air, and food with one message and one demand: ban fracking now. Governor Cuomo and the state legislature, ban fracking now. It's now my pleasure to introduce Sandra Steingraber, author, activist, biologist, without whom this coalition wouldn't be here today. It's now my pleasure to introduce Sandra Steingraber.
Thanks. Thank you, Eric. I am a biologist. I am also a cancer survivor and was told a few days after my 20th birthday that I had a kind of cancer, bladder cancer, that had demonstrable links to environmental exposure. So the first questions that I was asked by my diagnosing physician in 1979, while I was still lying there exhaling anesthesia, were questions about my childhood exposure to toxic chemicals, especially those that might be found in my drinking water. So as a young biologist, those questions really became then my life's work. Instead of going on to medical school, I went on to get a PhD in biology and devoted my work to understanding the connections between environmental health and human health. I did that work as a biologist, then as an author, and became the author of a trilogy of books on environmental health. Last fall, I was one of the lucky recipients of a Heinz Award for this work, and it comes, the Heinz Award comes with a $100,000 unrestricted cash prize, and that is the money that has become the seed money now for this new coalition, New Yorkers Against Fracking. So I thought I would just share with you a little bit of the backstory about my decision. So my most recent book, Raising Elijah, looks at pediatric environmental health threats. And fracking is one of them. You can't frack without laying down a blanket of smog over the communities that are being fracked. And as the mother of a son with asthma, as well as a biologist very interested in the development of pediatric respiratory tracts, I wrote about the impact of fracking-related air pollution on child development in my book, Raising Elijah, which only piqued my interest in fracking as a systematic problem that is blowing up the bedrock of our nation, turning the sand barrens of Wisconsin inside out with strip mining for frack sand, filling up the Midwest's airspace with crystalline silica, which is a known lung carcinogen. Became very interested in the earthquakes that are happening in northeastern Ohio. Wanted to do research there and so forth. And so I set out across the nation last summer to go to these places where fracking has happened and talk to people and do some investigation. And I was in Texas in the height of the drought. I saw signs in front yards where there was not a stick of grass, blade of grass left that said, I need water, you haul, I pay. And the fracking trucks full of fresh water were going right on by. So there was no money, there's no water for people or for irrigating crops, but there was still water to blast hydrocarbons out of the earth. I was nearly run off the road by a fracking truck in North Dakota. I was in the Grand Tetons in Wyoming and saw the devastation just right outside the gates, where the churches of Wyoming were organizing people to speak out for the preservation of God's creation. And I happened to be then in Utah in July at a time when an anti-fracking activist named Tim DeChristopher was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for his role in peacefully disrupting the auction of public lands for oil and gas extraction. And I heard Christopher say to the federal judge at the time of his sentencing, "This is what love looks like." And that made a very deep impression on me. So a few days later, when I received the phone call letting me know that I had this amazing award coming to me with a $100,000 check, I went out into the desert and I thought really hard. And it actually didn't take me very long to decide to donate that money to the anti-fracking movement here in New York, one of the only lucky places in the nation where we have this moratorium and we are temporarily protected. I wanted to try to use the money to turn that temporary protection into something permanent so that my children could live here. The molecules that make up their body are the rearranged molecules of air, food, and water. I felt that the best investment I could make with this money was to invest in the abiding environmental preservation of upstate New York, which is also, therefore, an act of public health. It took me a little longer to decide exactly what that meant, who I should give the money to and how. So I actually devoted the money to a number of different groups, including some I feel very personally attached to, such as Gas-Free Seneca, which is fighting the storage and transport of fracking-related chemicals on the south shore of Seneca Lake, because that's where my son was born, and I feel very close to that region. But I wanted the lion's share of this money to form this coalition, and as I see it, this coalition does not supersede the rich and heroic, diverse work of the grassroots anti-fracking movement. I kind of see the anti-fracking movement as a big opera with many characters, some of whom are working looking at the economics of fracking and the mortgage problems, some of which are looking at what happens to the wineries, some of which are like I, who are looking at child health and so forth. And this coalition is not going to attempt to choreograph that opera. Instead, it's kind of like the publicist for it. It will be a spotlight and a megaphone for the good work of all these different groups. And I'm pleased now to carry the first public message of Yorkers Against Fracking. We want Governor Cuomo to stand with us and ban fracking in New York State. Blowing up the bedrock of our state and pumping it full of toxic chemicals is not a sound basis for jobs creation or economic growth. And we want the governor to say that with us. We know that the revised draft supplemental generic environmental impact statement that would greenlight fracking in New York is a fatally flawed document, as pointed out by New York's finest scientists in their submitted comments to the DEC. We know that these more than 60,000 public comments are not receiving serious and close attention to the DEC, and we know this from the governor's public comments that this whole thing is going to be wrapped up in a matter of weeks now. We know that the carcinogen-dependent, accident-prone process called fracking will certainly result in harm to the people, air, and water of our state in ways that are not fixable. So our message to the governor is, if you break this, you own it. And we intend to live in an unfractured, unbroken state of New York, and we'll do whatever we can to protect our state, and we seek the governor to stand by our side. Thank you.
Thank you. Citizen Action of New York and the Working Families Party are really proud to be here today to join this new coalition in calling on our elected officials to do the right thing for New York's future. The proponents of fracking are the oil and gas industry, some of the most powerful corporations on earth. When they look at New York, they see green, but it's the wrong kind of green. They see dollar signs. They see a future where they can inject millions of gallons of water laced with toxic chemicals into our land. And that's millions of gallons for each well. And who cares what happens after that from their point of view? Well, we care. They're smart, they talk about jobs, and with persistent unemployment, that's an easy way to sell an industry on New York. But there are a few things they don't want us to know. The first is that hydrofracking upstate New York would actually destroy jobs. It would destroy jobs in agriculture and in tourism. And there's another thing they're not telling you. Those jobs are temporary, but as we heard from Sandra, those chemicals are forever.
The gas industry is like the spoiled child that has been going rampant across the United States. Poor regulations and oversight by other states have allowed many issues to come and play out in front of our eyes. We're all seeing that. New York is the place that spoiled child has come and didn't get away with it right away. And the overseer of that spoiled child started looking at it. But now we're seeing that spoiled child getting support from and backing from our governor, wanting this to go forward. There are clearly signs that have played out since Governor Cuomo has been elected that he wants this to go forward.
But what we see across the state in our conversations with folks from Buffalo and Western New York to the Finger Lakes to the Southern Tier to the Hudson Valley on down to New York City is that we love our state. We love New York. And that passion and that love and that commitment is what is driving the heart of this movement. And it's that commitment, that dedication to our families, to our friends, to our communities that the gas industry cannot compete with all of their slick ads and big dollars that they're spending in campaign contributions and press campaigns. That's something that is priceless, and that is what is going to win this movement. In early February, at the Syracuse Post-Standard editorial meeting, Governor Andrew Cuomo said a decision about hydrofracking could come in, quote, a couple of months. And we are here today to help him make that decision.
So I think we're looking for a moratorium, or at least some more time, because I think the home rule developments as of recently will sort themselves out. And if the state is given a little more time, or even a year, you're going to see bans everywhere. You're going to see it from right where I live. It's happening already. Binghamton is banned. Vestal is working on a ban in the Southern Tier. Wego is working on a ban. Corning is working on a ban. So even in these areas where it's perceived that hydrofracking is accepted or wanted or whatever, that's gone. That's like, that doesn't even exist in my community anymore. We live so close to Pennsylvania that you can see the flare-ups at night across the river. We're on this, right on the Susquehanna River. And from my living room, where I live right on the river, I can see the river and then flare-ups and frack trucks going down the highway all night long, just from the infrastructure from Pennsylvania. So we're already taking a beating on a lot of our infrastructure in our towns, and that's turning people's stomach to this whole thing.
There are perhaps hundreds of families across the state of Pennsylvania who are going through this. We have a growing population of water refugees in the state of Pennsylvania, and that is not indicative of a practice that is safe. So we're here today because we don't want Governor Cuomo to go the way of Tom Corbett. We want Governor Cuomo to be able to uphold a standard of safety that sees every single family in New York State as valuable. Not one more family should have to go through what the Sautners have gone through in Pennsylvania. And until Governor Cuomo can look into the eyes of every parent in New York State and say, yes, this is safe. I promise you this is safe for your kids. We don't have the standard we need to move forward with this.
We've done surveys around our counties, and the opposition to fracking is astounding once people realize the truth about gas drilling. We're thrilled that there's now going to be a statewide coalition so that all these separate grassroots organizations across the state can join their voices and make 900 towns into one strong New York State community. The only way that we can fight this non-democratic industry, which is accountable to no one except its profits, is by raising our voices in a unified decree of defiance. A coalition is the only way to achieve this kind of citizen rallying that is necessary to keep fracking out of New York State. Let's believe in New York and ban fracking throughout the state as one large New York voice.
New York City DEP concluded that hydrofracking would be catastrophic for the city of New York. I don't see that we have any reason to believe that it would not be catastrophic for the rest of the great state of New York. And it would be very, very unfortunate if Governor Cuomo moves forward to do something that is demonstrably causing serious issues in other places. I like movies with happy endings. I don't like movies with sad endings. And Governor Cuomo now has the opportunity to make a decision for the state of New York whether we are going to have a happy ending and be trailblazers to build out a renewable energy economy that could be modeled all throughout the United States, or he can poison us. I'm hoping for a happy ending. Governor Cuomo, which one will you give us? Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon. New Yorkers Against Fracking is a growing coalition of grassroots organizations and groups across New York that is standing united in support of a ban on fracking. We are sending a message to Governor Cuomo and our legislature. Defend our water, defend our air, defend our food, ban fracking in New York. Thank you.